And, since the devastating economic impact of the pandemic, some of you have stepped up and pitched in, creating GoFundMe pages or donating spare change where you can. The owner of Shoreline Sandwich Company says they're stepping up and raising money for local restaurants who are struggling to make ends meet. Chris Busk, the owner of the deli, says in less than 24 hours since posting on Facebook his new mission, over $3,000 have already been raised. He says he's hoping the momentum continues so local restaurants can each get $2,000 each. Busk says 2 of his restaurants have closed their doors since the pandemic. Because of that, lending a helping hand now feels only right, and especially going into the holidays.
As an owner, where you wear the weight of all that, all the time. How am I going to make payroll? How am I going to pay for the food? What if the food spoils and I have to order more? Or what if I'm behind a payment to a vendor and they won't let me order? How do I get food now or whatever? And that's just the reality of some of the things. And like I said, it just gets into that funky week where we're getting Christmas time, not many days for sales. Everybody's normally at home doing their thing with their family, and then same thing with New Year's. It's a couple difficult weeks.
Donations will only be accepted until Tuesday, so by Christmas Eve, the money will go to selected restaurants. Ways on how to donate are up on our website, khlitv.com. Just look for this story.